and welcome everybody to the second day of Virtual World Best Practice in Education Conference. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you today's keynote, Dr. Randall Sadler, with the theme Time Travel in the Metaverse. What's old is new again. And we're looking forward to his keynote. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Randall Sadler to you, very trusted and long-term team member on EduNation, as we've been working together for a good 13 plus years. I'm going to introduce Dr. Randall Sadler to you. And Dr. Randall Sadler and his avatar name is Randall Renoir, is Associate Professor of Linguistics and Director of TESL and ESL at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He teaches courses on collaboration, telecollaboration, virtual worlds, and language learning, and is teaching L2 reading and writing. He has published in journals including CALICO Journal, RECAL, LLT, Computers in Education, ELT, and in numerous edited volumes. His books include Virtual Worlds, Telecollaboration and Language Learning by Peter Lang in 2012, the Handbook of Informal Language Learning 2020, published by Wiley Blackwell, and New Ways in Teaching with Games 2020, and TESOL. He is the current president of CALICO, the Computer Assisted Language Instruction Consortium. Randall and myself, we've been working together on EduNation for a good 13 years, and it has been a very enjoyable teamwork indeed, with many, many fond memories. Without further ado, over to you, Randall.
Thank you so much, Heike. It always sounds so weird when you're presented by someone else about the things you've been doing when you know everybody else in the audience has done things that are just as interesting and many times more so. Yeah, 13 years that we've been working together, which, as I recall, means I think we both started working together in Second Life when we were about 20. Is that right? She has no answer.
Yes.
She has no answer to that. So my topic for today, as Heike mentioned, is time travel in the metaverse. Is what is new old again? And fair warning, I have some things to say about this latest term that is being thrown around all the time, metaverse. And that's kind of the main focus of my presentation today. If we have time, I'm hoping we can have more of an open conversation as well. Some of you who have been on EduNation may or may not recognize the image on this slide. That's actually a TARDIS, the interior of a TARDIS that we have up above EduNation. I did not build this TARDIS from scratch, by the way. I love building in Second Life, but this is one that I bought, and it has all sorts of different rooms and passages to explore. So if you've not been there, ask us later, and we'll show you how to get to EduNation and explore. We've got some great stuff. Heike told me I had to push EduNation, so there you go. We love EduNation. It's for education. I'll talk about it a bit later. So let me go ahead and get started. I think I'll have two parts here. The first part is kind of from me, and I hope if we have time, the second part will be from us, because I think that all of us are probably doing some interesting things, whether it's in virtual worlds or VR or augmented reality, and I really would like to hear from other people. So part one of the talk from me will be about what is the metaverse? Does it exist? Where did it come from? How can we use it as educators if it does exist? And part two, if we have time, I'd like for us to share our thoughts and questions and hear maybe about what you might be doing or using right now and how you're using it. So on this next slide, what I have here is a link and a QR code. So you might want to grab that now or put in the link now and have that free. If you haven't used Padlet, Padlet is just kind of an online bulletin board where you can double click on the screen to post a note. My thinking here is if you want to take a mental break while I'm talking, you might even put a few thoughts in there about what are you doing? Is there something you're using now, whether it's a virtual world or a VR environment, whatever the case may be? Or do you have some other things you're working on in there? Because I find at these conferences, the best thing is you learn so much from the talks, but also just the discussions you have with people you happen to meet. So I'd love to hear from people on that component. I'll have this link a bit later as well, just in case you missed it, although I saw it in chat too. So whenever I give a talk like this, one of the things to me that I like to do is take a look back, because we often ignore where things came from. And I'm curious if anybody knows this. When did this all begin? 1972 is this picture. Started earlier than that. But this is a Plato 4 computer. And if you've ever heard of the Plato system, drop a quick note in the chat or something. I'm curious. Here we have 1972, a display screen slightly bigger than what we use today. And here you have this woman wearing some really 70s clothes, and she's pointing at the computer screen. But here's the interesting thing. This is 1972. She's not pointing at the computer screen. That is a touch screen computer in 1972, which to me is absolutely mind-blowing. So the Plato system was started right here where I am, the University of Illinois, started in the very late 60s, really took off in the 70s. And much of what we think about today for online, it came from Plato. As you can see on this next slide, here's some of the things that the Plato system developed really for the first time. Things like a touchscreen plasma monitor that you see here. Plato Notes, that was the first message boards. Personal Notes, that was emails beginning. Talkomatic was chat rooms beginning. Term Notes was instant messaging. Remote screen sharing. Here you see on the right-hand side, all those little funky squiggles. Those were the first emoticons that all the kids are using today. Started back in the 70s. Online games like Star Trek Online. Online role-play games like Dungeons and Dragons. And as you can see at the bottom, 12,000 hours, more than that, of courseware for languages, for sciences, all over the place. Much of this was very audiolingual in nature, I suppose. But over 45 years ago, these things were taking place that, and my favorite example is that touch screen. I remember when I got my first iPhone, just, amazing. At that time, not knowing, that was old stuff. Plato did it so long ago. So when we move forward from Plato, where some of this idea is really beginning of what we might think of as a text-based metaverse, whatever a metaverse is. If we move forward, then some of you probably use things like MUDs, and I'll show you a MUD in a second. MUDs really started from really some guys at that time who really were big players of Dungeons and Dragons, were going off to college, and they wanted a way to keep playing. So no video chat back then. So they created a MUD, which is a multi-user dungeon or domain. And one of the first, which which is kind of pre-MUDs, was Colossal Cave Adventure. And another one, which is still around, actually is called British Legends, started in 1978. And again, if you were in anything like this, you will know this. Another popular one back in the day was Zork. Zork was the first one I actually played. But here we have two of these. There's British Legends, the one that's the dark screen. Colossal Cave Adventure is a light screen. It's a text-based system where you go in, you could explore. Later, you could play with other people, like in British Legends. A few years back, I took my students into British Legends during a class to show them how it worked. And one of my students literally stabbed me in the back and murdered me during class, which at least it was in the game rather than in real life. So I can't complain too much. So this was the start again of this. Again, text-based, but more immersive. You're drawn into the story. And it continued on for education. I don't know if anybody here ever used a MOO, which is a more advanced kind of a MUD, object-oriented. There used to be thousands of these. The school where I did my Ph.D., University of Arizona, they had a MOO called the Old Pueblo MOO. And actually at one time, I held office hours in there, in the Old Pueblo MOO. Schmooze University was around a long time. I think maybe it finally disappeared, but it was around until pretty recently. What's the difference? Well, if you look here, here's another image, right? So you can see a MOO, it's still text-based. But the difference with these is I could go to the administrator who called herself the Dungeon Master for the Old Pueblo MOO and request a classroom space, text-based. I could customize that space textually, however I wanted to, and I could have students come in and we could do text-based communication. So I would hold office hours. I also did some group student conferences in the MOO back in the day. It seems impossibly primitive now, but it was a big change back then. In popular culture, we started to get things. I don't know if anybody ever saw this. Star Trek, the animated series. Back in 1974, they had an episode. This was their recreation room, which they later called the holodeck in Star Trek: The Next Generation. But here's where in pop culture, you start to see people entering this fully immersive environment that they could interact with, which is pretty metaversy, right? Things are starting to change. Not too long after that, we get this. I don't know if anybody ever played in this environment called Habitat. Right? Habitat was really the first, as you can see here, kind of a 2D visual environment where you could go in and you could interact with other people. Here you see Terry and Kathy, and they're in one of the scenes in Habitat, and they can meet and they can talk and they can do things together. This is part of this system they called Quantum Link that was designed. And again, it was so far ahead of its time. 1986, this is on the Commodore 64 computer, developed by Lucasfilms, which, if that sounds familiar, it's because you know Star Wars, right? George Lucas, Lucasfilms. So he helped to develop this system called Habitat, virtual community, graphically based. Look at all the stuff that was in Habitat. Email, chat, file sharing, news, instant messages, multiplayer games, casino games until that was banned as being illegal, online auctions, and shopping 18 years before Amazon and 10 years before Google. I see somebody had a Commodore. Yeah, I had a Commodore at one point, but I don't think I ever got into Habitat. I probably didn't have a decent enough connection to do that with my dial-in modem. But again, This is kind of the trend, and it's the same if we look back to what I showed you earlier with the Plato 4 computer. Some of these leaps ahead happen, and then they're kind of lost, and then they get, quote, rediscovered by somebody who claims they're doing something new, even though many times it's not actually something new. So if we keep going forward, some of you probably have been in Active Worlds before. That was released in 1995, 8 years before Second Life. Right? And here's a immersive 3D world that you can explore. There I am in the form of my avatar, who looks like, I always think, if people remember who Fabio was, the male supermodel, kind of looks like Fabio in this case. But this environment, Active Worlds, yeah, I started my thesis there before Second Life, somebody says. Yeah, Active Worlds is still around. But this had especially in the early days, it had a very active education component. And it's a very interesting place. Don't forget Myst. Okay, well, you mentioned Myst. When I was doing my first master's degree, master's in education in Spokane, Washington, one of the guys in the program who I was good friends with said, hey, you want to come with me? We're going to stop by my house. I'll introduce you to my brothers. I was like, oh, cool. And we go there, and he goes literally to the room above their parents' garage. And here are these two guys with a bunch of computer equipment. And they introduced me to this thing they're working on. And it was going to be this game you could go in, and it was going to be so beautiful and graphically oriented. And it just blew my mind. And it was Myst. That's the guys who developed Myst, right? Now you can get Myst, by the way, for VR. I haven't gotten it yet, but I want to, because I want to see how that'll look. So at a time, Active Worlds had over 80 worlds devoted to education. It was a pretty amazing spot. Once we get into this area, suddenly things start to explode, as everybody knows. And you get lots of these environments. Some of them are very social environments. I don't know if anybody here has been in Habbo. It used to be called Habbo Hotel. If I'm remembering right, I think it was started by someone in Finland. There are Habbo hotels that are focused on speakers of Spanish and English and a number of other languages as well. So not a lot of educational use in Habbo, but for informal language learning, for people who are focused on language learning, it's an interesting spot, because you can have your students go to a Habbo hotel that the users are primarily Spanish speakers, and they'll really be immersed in that language. One other advantage of Habbo compared to some like Second Life is they boba things, right? Boba is what happens if you go into Habbo and somebody types a swear word. They recognize it as a swear word and they change it into boba instead. It doesn't always work, but I think in this quote, in this room, I think it's in Spanish. And if I remember right, one of the characters, I can't quite make it out on my screen, but it says, hola, algo aquí quiere boba? Hey, somebody here want a boba? I'm not sure what that was, but something inappropriate, I'm sure. For kids, of course, people looked at environments like Club Penguin to do things. The issue with some of these, like Habbo and Club Penguin, compared to environments like Second Life or OpenSim, though, is the amount of customization you could do is actually quite limited. It's one of the things I love about Second Life, because if you come into an environment like Second Life, some of you have been here a lot, some of you are quite new, I know, but one of the advantages of Second Life, and this will connect to the metaverse later, almost everything you see in Second Life, as you guys know, was built by users, not by the company. That's one of the very interesting things philosophically in Second Life. They provided the platform, they provided the structure, but almost everything you see, ranging from clothing to these rocks that we're standing on, to here you see a site called Ancient Kyoto. I think it's still around, where I went to this site. People are speaking in Japanese. I met a cat there. The cat had the role of community translator. So if there are people who were there who did not speak Japanese, who spoke English for the most part, that person was willing to help people out to communicate with other people. But that wonderful building in the background, that was built by the owners of ancient Kyoto. And some of you probably know this other sim, Avalon. Here you see I'm there in a very poorly created guise of a hobbit, maybe a little too tall for a hobbit, since I'm almost 2 meters in real life. But another avatar is there who's the dragon. And off to the left, she was shy. She did not want to be in the picture, was this amazing kind of water sprite floating in a bubble of water. And we're chatting there in this wonderful sim. So, there's these amazing things that can happen in these environments, as we know, whether you're in the languages or when I first came to Edunation, my next door neighbor was somebody who was studying genetics. And what he was using Second Life for was to create replications of DNA strands so that he could bring his students into this world and explore DNA in this very 3D way. So the customization to me for education, it's 100% key. It lets me build things that I want. So if you do ever come over to Edunation, which is open to any educator, no matter your field, we've got something like 120 scenes in a holodeck there now, which means there's circles on the ground. You can click it and you can choose from a menu of things ranging from meeting places to airports to you name it. We've got a bunch of different ones there. That's, to me, is a strength in virtual worlds like this. So there's an image, actually kind of an old image of Edunation on the left-hand side. And there I am in one of the builds I made that I really love, which is called, arrogantly, I called it Chateau Renoir to get my name into the build. But again, as educators, if anybody wants to come and explore, I'm happy to meet with people. If anybody wants to use the space to teach a lesson, perfectly happy with that as well. If somebody wants to have, their more set space, we rent out plots of land, but people can use it. It's totally up to you. So let's get back to what I actually had on my title slide, because the question is, what is the metaverse? And I think that's a really interesting question. And if you look online, you're going to find so much about the metaverse. So what I can tell you for sure is the metaverse will revolutionize everything if you buy this book for $27 or $14.99 on the Kindle. Well, I'm not sure what that means, but if we go to the next slide, you can see, in addition, the metaverse will be the next big thing. By the way, I have no idea why the colors on these two covers, they're almost exactly the same. I'm not sure what happens with that, but yeah, it's the next big thing. So if you snooze, you're really going to meta lose. These were all from Amazon. Amazon has so much in it right now on the metaverse. It's a little mind-blowing. Here's some other important stuff on the metaverse. So there's so many ways on the metaverse, clearly, that you can get rich. So this was based on a search of the metaverse, blockchain wars, future of big tech monopolies, the NFT handbook, metaverse investing, metaverse for beginners, metaverse investing for beginners. I think, to be safe, yeah, you probably have to buy all these books so that you don't lose out on this next big thing. Yeah, and as somebody put in the chat, admittedly, NFTs are hot right now. Absolutely. Some of them ridiculous, but absolutely. Yeah, it's a very interesting world we live in right now. But what does this all really mean? Because you've made it, as you can see here, when you're even getting mentioned by Forbes magazine. So here we have on the left-hand side an image from Forbes talking about the digital land grab. Metaverse real estate prices rose 700% in 2021. Or the other one, the price of virtual land NFTs in the metaverse is skyrocketing. But is the market overheating? Those of us who have been in Second Life for a while know the answer to that is yes. The market is definitely overheating. I remember hearing this in the news. This on the left-hand side, it talks about this. December 2021, a fan of the musician Snoop Dogg, you can see the arrows there. And hey, I love Snoop Dogg, don't get me wrong. But this fan paid $450,000 to purchase virtual land in the metaverse next to Dogg's virtual property in Ethereum. I wish I had $450,000. I don't, sadly. But, you know, this right now, I think we're at a stage with this whole idea of the metaverse in a similar way to when Second Life came in. There's going to be there's this massive hype. I think it's going to die down, and people are going to, for lack of a better term, reject it, but they're going to reject it prematurely, as I think happened in Second Life, honestly. There was so much hype in Second Life. It was going to change everything, and it didn't change everything, but it does some really, really interesting things, and I think it's a bit unfortunate that people have ignored that. But how do you really, really know you've made it? Well, you've really made it with your idea when Hollywood picks it up. Right? So some of you probably saw one or both of these movies. I actually enjoyed both of them a lot. Ready Player One is one movie that really connected to this idea of the metaverse. And the other one you see there, Free Guy, which I found to be a wonderfully strange, in some ways, movie. For me, the point here is, ironically, I think the ones right now who are getting the metaverse the most right, it's Hollywood, including the aspect of this kind of idea of rampant corporate greed that wants to control it. To me, they're spot on in this respect. And, well, I guess that's life sometimes. So, what are we left with right now? This kind of logical, inevitable end result being the billionaire battle for the metaverse, where rather than necessarily battling for space, they're doing that as well. Maybe the next great battle will be for meta space, I guess we could say, because clearly we have people who are trying to come up with their own version of what they think the metaverse should be. But I don't necessarily think they understand really what the metaverse is all about, because none of these things really tell us what the metaverse actually is. Some of you probably know, based on something that you've read, what the original idea about the metaverse was, because it comes from this book, Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. I'm curious, has anybody read that? If you've read it, just put like maybe a Y in the chat window or something. Yes. Oh, so many people have read it, right? It's really considered a classic now. Twice. Yeah, I've read it several times as well. Super interesting book, right? 1992, Neil Stephenson. In this book, he uses the term metaverse, really in this focus for the first time. So what is the metaverse for Neil Stephenson? So if we look here, here's a quote, a couple quotes. I'll read them out in my most dulcet tones. Hero spends his free time in a world where he is not seeing real people, of course. This is all a part of the moving illustration drawn by his computer, according to specifications, coming down the fiber optic cable. Ooh, early mention of fiber optics. The people are pieces of software called avatars. They are the audio-visual bodies that people use to communicate with each other in the metaverse. Right? There's his idea of the metaverse. By the way, Some people claim this novel was the first to use the term avatar. That's not true, because we already saw the first use of avatar for this sort of environment, which was for habitat. That's what Habitat called the people in there. Those were avatars, and remember, that was long before them. Another favorite of mine in here on the screen that should sound very familiar to people. There's something new. A globe about the size of a grapefruit, a perfectly detailed rendition of planet Earth, hanging in space at arm's length in front of his eyes. Hero had heard about this, but had never seen it. It's a piece of CIC, Control and Information Center, software called simply Earth. It is the user interface that CIC uses to keep track of every bit of spatial information that it owns, all the maps, weather data, architectural plans, and satellite surveillance stuff. As I say, Google Earth, is that you? In fact, the creators of Google Earth freely admit that they are very influenced by this book when creating that. So this metaverse for Stevenson, especially so many of you have read it, you know this is an environment that connects this virtual world with the real world and beyond, right? They can inhabit this world. They can live in this world. They can interact with this world in very, very interesting ways. And our main character in this book, you saw his name is Hero. This tells you something about Stevenson's sense of humor, right? Because the main character or hero of the story is named, the Japanese name, Hero. And what's his last name? Hero protagonist. Right. What does he do? He delivers pizza for the mob. And in his spare time, he plugs into the metaverse. It's great. I love that stuff. So here we have this book, 1992, that brings out these ideas for the first time, except it doesn't bring these ideas out for the first time. Some of you may have read this story, but I bet you not nearly as many. Put a Y in the chat if you have read Pygmalion's Spectacles. What a modern kind of title that is. All right, we're still getting, I see some people. Great. Well, here we see, and some wows, right? Here is Pygmalion's Spectacles. As you can see, if you're looking closely at the screen, 1935. 1935. Yeah, you can find this online. I should have put in a link. Look for it. It's old enough. It's out of copyright. You can find it. So 1935, when, as I say in my notes to myself, unlike today, of course, one of the first uses of the technology was try to meet scantily clad women, as you can see in the right hand lens of that spectacle. Men, we never change. But unlike some of what some of us used to see who got comic books, remember in the back of the comic books, there was also the ad for the X-ray glasses that was going to let you see through people's clothes. Yeah, that didn't work. But these are not simply spectacles for this book, as you'll see in this quote from one of the main characters. The main character who's the older guy you see in the other spectacle. So remember, this is 1935. This is what's very cool to me. So here's this quote. Listen, I'm Albert Ludwig, Professor Ludwig. As Dan was silent, he continued, it means nothing to you, eh? But listen, a movie that gives one sight and sound. Suppose now that I add taste, smell, even touch, if your interest is taken by the story. Suppose I make it so that you are in the story. You speak to the shadows, and the shadows reply. And instead of being on a screen, the story's all about you, and you are in it. Would that be to make real a dream? I love it. 1935. That, by the way, is 39 years before the invention of the holodeck in Star Trek the Animated Series. 57 years before Snow Crash. and 60 years before active worlds. I think I just saw somebody mention Metropolis, 1927, which, oh boy, if you've not seen the movie Metropolis, you're missing out. Talk about a classic. And the robot is magnificent in there. So my point here is, again, some of these things that we consider new are not new at all. Even some of the original ideas we think are new are not new at all. And you can go back and see some of these. This is a short story, well worth reading. But so this leaves that question. What the heck then is the metaverse? As you can see, you break down the word, meta from the ancient Greek, could be more comprehensive, transcending, or beyond. I think that's the best one. Beyond. Universe is universe, beyond the universe. So it's a universe that goes beyond the one we live in today. I think that makes sense. That's simple enough, but it doesn't really give some of the depth. But still, to me, here's the problem. By my definition, as you'll see on the next slide, I think the metaverse clearly does not exist yet. What's happening right now is you're getting companies using metaverse the same way that they use terms like AI or digital. One of my favorite examples, Dyson vacuums. Ooh, the digital motor. What the heck does that mean? The motor has a microchip that runs it, just like every motor nowadays. But ooh, it's digital. It sounds great. Or I've seen ads for these sunglasses, right? And the sunglasses are advertised as HD sunglasses, high definition sunglasses. Really? Come on. Or AI gets thrown around all the time right now. And the fact is, we don't have AI yet. If you look at the classic definitions of AI, we don't have truly thinking. An AI toaster. I mean, come on. That's wonderful. So it gets used all the time. But let's be honest. Mark Zuckerberg's view of the metaverse is not a view of the metaverse. It's one that's really designed instead for profit for the company. There's nothing wrong with profit. But by my definition, we do not yet have the metaverse. So here's what I think the metaverse should include. And for me, when I was putting this slide together, this is coming from books like Snow Crash. It's coming from what we have today, and it's coming from what I've read from other people as well. So I am calling this my Metaverse Manifesto. I sound like the Unabomber. I apologize. But I think there are three components here. Right? There's essential, these are kind of the philosophical components that need to be in the metaverse. You also have just some of the general characteristics that are always important, and then you have platforms that it would involve. Now, here's the key thing here, I think, before I describe these. Imagine for a minute the internet, if it was impossible to travel between the Amazon site and the Wikipedia site, or between almost any of the major sites. That wouldn't be the internet, right? It wouldn't be the internet at all. So the big point on this slide is the metaverse needs to be thought of as, in some ways, the meta-net, right? Beyond the internet. It's a fully immersive internet where everything is connected. So this would allow you to be here in Second Life and then seamlessly move over to Pokemon Go or One of Us, or maybe in the future, the University of Illinois virtual campus to attend a class. But not just move, right? You could do all of that using the same avatar and your inventory in a fully immersive mode. One of my pet peeves, I've got such a huge inventory here in Second Life. Let me see. I'm seeing where I am right now. I've got like 60,000 items in my inventory, and I cleaned it out recently. So you'd be able to move anything from your inventory. So think about this, that amazing flying car, maybe that you bought in Second Life, you could drive it over to Grand Theft Auto to help with your doing chaos there. Yeah, somebody says only 60,000. I used to have 3 or 4 times that, but I finally did some extensive cleaning because I couldn't find anything. So, to borrow a phrase, when I think about the metaverse, I melodramatically, I hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, some of these, I think, will be really familiar to those of us who have been working or teaching in immersive environments like Second Life. But then there's these key differences. And these differences explain why I don't think we currently have a metaverse, or why, given the way things are going right now with businesses, I'm not sure if we ever will. So here's what I think you need to make a valid claim to metaverseosity. Look on the right-hand side first. Like now, has to have open access and it has to be persistent. You could say that, you could make that argument for Second Life, right? Anybody can come in. If you log out, it's still there. Should be hardware agnostic. Many of them are, not all. Portability of items and avatars, it's not really there. Many creators, some settings have this, some don't. It's an overlay of the real world and beyond. So not just in Second Life, but the metaverse, you could also interact with the real world at the second time, and everything needs to be connected. This is that Web X.0 sort of an idea. So some of these we have, some of these we don't. Characteristics, interactivity, we've got that here, but the interactivity in the metaverse has even more depth. You can perceive the interactivity. If you touch something, you feel it. Avatars, highly immersive. Some do better jobs than that with others. And for the platforms, VR, of course, would be part of it, but also augmented reality. And again, augmented reality, think of like Google Glasses, where you put those on and text overlays coming in, that sort of thing. Also mixed reality. Think like Microsoft HoloLens. Right, so you are interacting with the real world and 3D object at the same time. And then another one, which is my dream in the future, which would be something called neural reality. Right? No more headset. Maybe you just have a jack in the back of your head, like in the Matrix. I don't know if I'd want that, but that sort of thing I think would be pretty nice. So these are some of these factors, and so let's talk about what we really have right now that some of us are using right now. If we don't have a metaverse, where are we now? How are we going to get there? Well, what we do have right now is our cool friend, virtual reality, VR. And when I think of VR, I think of it in 2 ways. And some of these ideas come from my friend, Regina Kaplan-Rakowski. Low immersion VR, I think we're in that right now, right? This is our programs like Second Life, right? You're looking at the computer screen. And then high immersion. Many of you have been in VR headsets. That's where you got a headset, you're in the 360 space. I'm doing some research in this area right now. So this is kind of where we're at. And some of you have used some of these spaces. I'm curious, again, throw some things in the chat if you've used any of these spaces. There's so many right now. They're popping up like mad. But here's just a few. Some of you may have been in Decentraland. Right, there's somebody who has. Somebody's been in 3 of the 4. Nice. Bonus points. Sandbox, Somnium Space, Horizon Worlds, which honestly I'm kind of disappointed in so far. I don't know who else has been in Horizon Worlds, but I know it's still in progress, but I've been that thrilled with it at this point anyway. Or others. I did some research. Horizon Worlds is a virus. Wow. Don't hold back. Right. Some others that I've done some research in so far, VR Chat, Mozilla Hubs, which honestly makes me want to throw up when I go in there in a headset. Yeah. VTime, limited, but an interesting space. There's a lot of them designed for businesses. Spatial's one of them, but there's so many. I forgot to include Zoom, right? We've all been living on Zoom lately, right? Alcove. Who's used Alcove? Anybody? Here's the weird thing about Alcove. alcove was designed by the American Association of Retired People, which is weird, right? But it's a house, and it's a really good space, actually. It's worth looking into. And alt space, of course, is one of the big ones. So why aren't these the metaverse? Well, you know, if we go back to my chart, if we look back at my chart, here's why these aren't. Because the items that are circled in red are things that aren't quite there yet, depending on the platform. But they're missing, especially things like everything is connected, overlay of the real world and beyond, portability. This is where we're certainly not at the metaverse yet. And again, my concern is the way these are all being developed by companies and companies and companies. Well, you know, Facebook, they're not going to want to connect with another company and let people move in between them and take their things with them. I think about this in terms of what if the internet had not been invented until today? I don't know if we'd ever get it like we have now. So my time is quickly running out. So I want to give a quick mention here of some research that I'm actually doing right now with a student. She just graduated. Now she's Dr. Thrasher at Illinois, with my primary research partner, Melinda Dooley, over in Barcelona, and a classroom teacher there, Monica, who's a wonderful teacher. I call her a cat herder because she's working with sixth graders. So we're teaching 24 very, very, very energetic sixth grade students in Barcelona using VR. And clearly, I'm not going to have a lot of time to go over this because I want to open up time for questions. But we used a platform called Immerse that some of you may be familiar with to work with these kids. Don't be deceived. There are so many platforms right now that are like Immerse, Immerse VR, immersive. It's all Immerse something. This is just one called Immerse. This was designed specifically for teachers to teach English to groups of students in VR. So it has some elements that we find really useful. I'm going to skip a slide here because I don't know. Talk about that. I'll let this one res. Some of the things that they have in here, as that slide is resing, they have 34 different locations or experiences. Airport arrival, backyard barbecue, city central, Wizard's Classroom is my favorite. It's for the Oculus Quest 2. Maximum 7 students in a lesson, which, you know, you might think, what the, only 7 students. Let me tell you, when you're working with sixth graders in VR, suddenly 7 seems like a plenty. That hence the comment about herding cats. Some customizability is available, and they're going to increase that. Well, we've been talking with the company. To me, one of the big limitations is usage is based on the teachers paying, their idea being that you're going to be having students come in and they're going to pay your lessons. I'm not sure if that model will continue. For our research, we took these kids into 4 locations so far. In Immerse, you can see one of them is a grand hall with a dragon skull sticking out of it. There's an art studio. Also, we looked at a garage that had kind of sports-related stuff, and a house, kitchen, all these sorts of things. So we were brainstorming with the teacher, what kind of vocabulary do the students need to learn? What kind of grammatical structures do they need to learn? And with that, we used the teacher interface in Immerse, because one nice thing is for all of these settings, they've already developed lessons, but you can also create your own lessons, which is really nice and very useful for us. And there you can see the teacher interface and the lesson interface. The teacher platform looks like this. The teacher normally joins from a monitor rather than a VR headset, because that way, oh, it's about to get noisy. We're having somebody come to our house, and my beagle is probably going to go crazy from enjoyment and do crazy barking noises. So pardon the noise. You can see in the teacher interface, they have access to everything related from animations. They can change their characters. They can do video chat, so the students will actually see their real face. rally the students to bring them to you, because herding cats, things you can put out. There's lots of things that you can put out in this system, which we really like. A whiteboard, scoreboards, sticky notes, images, YouTube videos, slides, and there are things like instant messages and a timer. You can manage the students, their voice, what teams they're in, all sorts of different things. So I'm almost out of time here. So this is still in progress, you know. So I'm not going to talk really about findings, I think, at this point, other than to say the teacher perspective, the student perspective, and what we're finding so far quantitatively. It's been a very effective tool. Students who don't normally talk are talking. The students are talking a lot. They're interacting with objects and us, the teachers, in this platform. Here you can see them in the art studio, where the task in this time was there was a stack of cards. They'd have to grab a card, draw whatever was on that card on the board and label it, and then grab another card, add to it, add to it, add to it. So this one you see on the right-hand side there from Marçal, when he was describing this later, he's talking about, I drew a triangle. On the triangle, I drew 2 mushrooms, and then all these things that he added onto it. These are 6th graders, remember, low level 6th graders, but they're producing just incredible amounts of language, which was wonderful for us. So I'm gonna stop there, and I don't know if anybody put anything on the Padlet, but I'm almost out of time anyway. So I'm gonna temporarily skip over that to say to everyone, thank you so much for coming. There's my email address. If people have connections, if people want to stop by Edunation sometime, you're certainly welcome to come. I'm happy to show people around. If you like building stuff, I love building stuff together. I'm happy to do that. I'm going to skip back to here in a second. I do have one more slide. Scan that if you'd like. There's a bibliography that goes with this. I didn't want to just send it to everybody, because how boring is a bibliography? But if you want it, it's there. You're most welcome to get it. They'll probably put it in chat as well. And I'll go back to the slide with my image. So again, I'm probably out of time here, but
thank you ever so much, Randall. It truly has been a time travel